All right. What's going on, traders? This is Eru here with STAX AI. It is March 4th, Wednesday, as usual here on YouTube. And we've got, I think it's basically Broadcom earnings that are coming up after the bell today. But we've got some stuff to talk about. You guys might have noticed, even though we have had some, geopolitical tensions, strikes with Iran and neighboring countries there. We actually saw SPY end up pretty green today. Overseas we're seeing the Korean markets, Iran and Dubai's markets, all ending up pretty red. But we are seeing SPY actually making a pretty strong move to the upside. So we got some stuff to talk about today. What you guys can see here. I'll leave this up for a moment while we discuss a couple things. But if you guys are here on YouTube live with me, do me a favor, hit that like button, say hi in the chat. That way I know you guys are here. And as always, we'll have a conversation. We'll take a look at what the flow says, what STAX says. Have a little conversation about STAX AI and some of the prints that we've seen this last week. I'm just going to read this off of what, a couple of posts that I saw earlier today. First thing is we do see Broadcom, AVGO, reports their Q1 after the close. Polymarket actually has a 96% odd that they will have an EPS beat. Okay. Now, what I want you to understand about that is that very likely means that a lot of what is expected is priced into the news or priced into the current price action. All right. So understand, their revenue right now looks like $19.1 billion, which is 28% year over year. EPS expected at $2.03, 27% year over year. And options right now are pricing about a 7% move after earnings. With that being said, let's just peek over real quick at what we see here. Broadcom for today. Well, first off, if you take a look, politicians have kind of been buying, but a lot of these are from the end of last year. And we also do have what David Taylor here bought and sold a little bit here. So a little bit of a mixed bag, but I will say Broadcom does have, some strength within this AI market. They definitely will be, they will be necessary and used, for their chip productions. In terms of the insiders, though, we have seen quite a bit of selling throughout the beginning of this year. So nothing too recent, but this is definitely before this report here. We've got CFO, CEO, president. That's combined what? Let's see. 40 to $50 million sold off on that end. All right. Now, doesn't necessarily mean that price will necessarily drop, but it is something to keep in mind is that, the leadership here has been doing their best to get out of their positions, whether it's they want to buy another yacht or something like that. But their price that they've gotten out at is at that 350 range. On the other hand, what we have is WaveX. WaveX is showing quite a bit of premium being sold off, both calls and puts. So that's kind of indeterminate when it comes down to it. We can understand that WaveX tends to be more of a daily read as to what's going on, but especially when we do go into things such as earnings. If we see some big spikes in this, we very possibly could take that as a signal of what they're expecting in terms of moves up or down. Now for the week for Broadcom, I generally like to go and filter here for the buys. We do see some big money calls and puts being taken out today. A little bit more on the call side. What we can do here is I can go filter for just today, and we can see here the definitely more calls than puts. The puts that they're aiming for, the short-term puts that they're aiming for is 315 and below. It's trading at about 320 right now. But we do have some calls for 360 for this week, and also mid-March 320, 332 and a half. The larger expectation to the upside here is about 19%, and another one for about 12%. So definitely leaning toward the bullish side. I will say though, I mean, it is expected with the beat for Broadcom. Question is definitely going to be how big of a beat do we see for them? Another thing we can do here is we'll just take the range of this week. See, okay, we do have $68 million of call, or $68 million of equity that was bought just yesterday. 218,000 shares. And through the week, definitely we do see a little bit more on puts, but realistically, some of these puts that were taken out around that 310 level are down as they have, you know, we've seen price move up about $10 from there. So just what this says right now is that there is definitely a little bit of bullishness when it comes down to Broadcom. Again, with what's expected on Polymarket, you know, I'm expecting that they beat earnings as well. Let's take a look at the chart real quick though. Broadcom did fill this gap that was created back 2 earnings ago. As you can see, I mean, look at all these green E's on the bottom. That's definitely why we're expecting a beat. There is a little bit of this head and shoulders pattern that's formed. The expectation for that is for it to probably come back down to 250 if you believe in that type of a move. But it doesn't have to happen during this earnings. What we have definitely seen though is that expectations for names like this are fairly high. So, you know, if Polymarket's saying 97% chance of a beat, if we just come in line or just a slight beat in that situation, we definitely could see this sell off back down to that $300 range, even potentially break down below. So that's, I would say that's definitely where the risk is when it comes down to Broadcom. Broadcom faces earnings test as shares slide 23% despite AI revenue surge. Yeah, I mean, that's from the top from here. You know, we're down about 23% from the top. But you can understand most of big tech has done this alongside with those geopolitical tensions. You know, we definitely have had a little bit more uncertainty in the markets right now. We'll talk about that as well. There's a very interesting playbook as to what potentially could be happening at this point. So yeah, I mean, we've just been at this channel. If you believe we're going to bounce off that channel, which we kind of have, we saw a little bit of a reversal on the weekly too. You know, just starting to see a little bit of a oversold conditions when it comes down to this name. I don't know if you're in the chat, go ahead, let me know. What do you think? You think I mean, I think we all expect Broadcom to beat. EPS should be a beat. But what do you think about price? I will say personally, for a lot of these current earnings right now, a lot of overnight moves don't necessarily translate to what's going to happen the next day. We saw that happen with a lot of these big names. Nvidia popped overnight, ended up selling off once the morning came. We saw CrowdStrike as well yesterday at close with earnings, dropped, came back, kind of stayed, you know, fairly even through the morning, and then had a little bit of a pop. So they're up about 3% or so right now. So earnings, remember, earnings a lot of times is going to be a gamble. What happens the next day does not always correlate to the numbers that have been released. A lot of what is expected is generally going to be priced in. Here's the earnings schedule as well, by the way. We do also see, let's see, Rigetti, Okta, the Weeble. I think the big one is actually is going to be tomorrow, is just going to be Costco. Costco's report. Take a look real quick at RGTI, Rigetti. This is one of those quantum names. had this giant run up over here, came right back down. We've seen this pattern over and over and over. It is near this low or this trend at the bottom. It kind of has broken down from a previous trend. You can see from here. Do you think this is coming back up? You know, it's got that market cycle look. Let me show you here. For those of you that have been with me for a while. Market cycle happens all the time, right? So we saw it's when these names get really hot, they go up to this point of euphoria, this high up here, come back down, bounce just a little bit. Easier to see with this one here. Very similar to what's going on. And now we're at this anger / depression range down here. I think it's primed and ready to go back up from where we're at. The only other thing though here is that Rigetti is one of those names where you guys can see this. Look at that net margin, guys. Net margin negative 10,321%. So, you know, they're one of those companies that, you know, they're heavily invested in their future. Quantum computing is something that will be continued to be talked about, and if they are able to survive through these, you know, these downtrends and survive through these harsher parts of the economy, you know, you could argue right now that we're in a bit of a recession. That negative 10,000 net margin, it's concerning, but again, this is something that is poised for the upcoming, you know, 10-15 years. You know, once we get and quantum computing becomes a bit more of a mainstream. So I will say though, with the earnings expectation, this really realistically could go either way. It could, if it doesn't hold this 17 range, it could come back down toward about 12 or 13 bucks. If it does pop, you immediately run into resistance at about 21 or so. Okta is the other one. Very similar too, right? We saw a lot of this. Yep, same thing. All right. There are buyers in this entire range. We are seeing decent selling at the tops, but we are also seeing a bit of buying up near the bottom. As we come back down to this range here, you see what's standing out to me here is that as we come back down, it's hard to say right now. We don't actually see full absorption, meaning that what you want to see is as we come back down to the lower ranges, that there's fewer and fewer people willing to sell, right? So you should see volume dip as we get to the lower ranges, and then we see big pushes back up, volume coming back in those situations. Okta PE ratio at a 66 is fairly high, but they do at least make money, right? Unlike Rigetti. Let's just jump. I don't think we see too much in terms of flow for these names. At least let's take a look. RGTI. Not much going on with that. Last prints we saw were in February. More bullish than bearish, but you have to keep in mind this is pretty small premium for this right here. Okta. Oh, that's a big put spike right there. Might be looking a little bit more bearish actually. They aren't buying any calls or anything, and flow's been pretty sparse. All right, let's talk about the markets overall. So today we saw a big push up, and why did that happen? a big push up had a lot to do with this war between the U.S. and Israel, or U.S., Israel, and Iran, right? This last week we saw the strikes that happened, and then a lot of retaliation, and it led into this geopolitical risk. The risk, a lot of it just has to deal with the pricing of oil, with the Strait of Hormuz being shut down, Iran controlling it, basically leads into a supply constraint that is poised to cause oil to go higher. Now, that's something that would definitely hurt the U.S. in the long run, right? Uh, I'll get to your Tesla in a moment. Let me discuss the market first, and then we'll get to those. You guys can drop your tickers in below. But the market started to price in all that risk, and then we just earlier today started to hear about potential ceasefire, or at least some sort of deal being made between our countries. So with that being said, it's kind of the overall playbook that we see when it comes down to this administration. Inject fear into the markets, inject fear into the population. Markets drop. Once we find more certainty, we recover and end up going higher. So there's a very solid possibility right now that we do see markets start to make new all-time highs in the next few weeks potentially. But then the question is, what type of, we still have those tariff concerns. We still have, and until this entire situation is resolved, this could just be a little bit of a fake out right now when it comes down to the markets. In my channel, in our Discord, I did post something by the Kobayashi letter. It's a Twitter feed that, X feed that talks a lot about the markets. And there's a playbook that they shared, and they say they think steps number 7 is near, meaning this is kind of the calming of the storm and calming of the risk in the markets. All right, let's get to your Tesla real quick. Tesla looking fairly strong in today's Wave X. When you take a look at what's being bought, they are aiming for May and the end of the year, December. This one's actually a fairly interesting one. 500 contracts for a little over 4,000 each, aiming for 500. That's a 23% move to the upside. This one is a bit shorter term, 6% move to the upside, but not necessarily a fresh position. There's already open interest in those names, or in those contracts. The chart for Tesla, I mean, it's held up pretty strong up over here right now. I did have a little bit of a bearish expectation for this to move down, but it's still staying up. This could turn out into being a bull flag. Holding up along these, this is starting to wedge a little bit, and a push back up from this lower bound. If you're bullish Tesla, you're waiting for this to break this downtrend. So right around, what, 410 or so. You want it to break up above, retest, then head up higher to the top of this channel. Could even argue this channel could be redrawn a little bit now. So what we want to see here is that when we hit the bottom of this channel, that we actually see a strong push up, and each time we come down that we actually see lower volume. So this volume compared to this, it's still fairly comparative, but I mean, lower, yeah. You could say at least from this first step, this is lower. This is now lower as well. So we can't. We definitely could say there's been a bit of absorption happening here. The thing about Tesla that always worries me is these extremely high PE ratios. While today's market doesn't necessarily, it's not the entire story. It is something that, at least with with the past and the history of the markets, PE ratios like this tend to eventually go back down, whether it is that the price drops or we see their earnings continue to go higher. So, does their earnings continue to get better? Does their margin get better? Do they continue to sell more of their cars or get deals for their robots that they're developing, or even the power the power wall that they sell, right? So I think once we break this down trend line, we'll probably see a retest, and I would put a target here toward about what 435 to start. Is this orange line showing where this is what's called the point of control? That's where the most buying and selling has happened. So you're bound to run into some buyers and sellers at that range. I mean, their recent earnings was decent, and after that earnings they sold off a little bit. But yeah, we're just, I think this is something, if you're patient with, there's probably going to be a decent entry for it. If you guys haven't already seen, I did do a STAX AI back testing video, and it's something where we are gearing up to release our STAX tester for you guys very soon. The ones that came in this week, this one, AMD for July 260, 36% move to the upside, fairly interesting. Microsoft, this one was the big one, $44 million spent. This is one of our bigger prints that we've seen on STAX AI. January 2027, 575 strike, which is a 41% move to the upside. So at least what this is saying is that, the fear with tech and the fear with software is starting to calm down, and that these are solid entries. I would definitely say Microsoft, I like that entry. This, for a contract for 2027, that's a decent price for it. 41% to the upside is, pretty optimistic, I will say, though, because it's back past toward all-time highs, and 50,000 contracts. This person definitely has some sort of insider information to be putting that type of money in on it. AMD April 210. So this right here is AMD's STAX AI print. If you're going with April, right? I mean, your target's right around here, which isn't too bad. I mean, today's move 5% up to the upside, it's probably already helped quite a bit. You do have kind of a wall here over at 214 to be concerned with. But if we can break back up that way, you've got this gap to potentially fill, which is probably where you should be targeting. Webull does report today. I haven't heard too much about this. So the thing that concerns me about Webull, like I talked about this before, is that a lot of people are looking at this as the next Robinhood, right? Robinhood's done a great job, but if you take a look at where Robinhood was, right? Hood was priced down here at that same range, $6 to $7 on the low end, right? $7 or so. All right. So a lot of people are looking at it as, okay, so Webull, right, on the low end, $7 right here. If Webull can make this same type of move to the upside, we can make a lot of good money on it, right? But let's talk about what they do. Okay, while they both are retail trading platforms, what is it that Webull has and what is it that Webull doesn't have? Well, Webull has the same basic trading that is offered, right? You can trade options, you could buy and sell at a very low commission. I do believe they have crypto buying and selling as well. However, do they have all the other things that Robinhood has offered, right? Like it doesn't matter if you like Webull more than Robinhood or not. What is it that Robinhood's able to do, and what is it that Robinhood has in terms of services and revenue that Webull doesn't? That's the big question. And is Webull making those moves to get to that point? So while this can definitely come back up toward, 20 bucks, maybe even higher as time goes on, they have to develop that platform more and more. So just off the top of my head, Robinhood, they offer their Robinhood Gold. That makes them some money. They've got a credit card that they offer now. They have potentially these Trump accounts that are supposed to be open are going to be through Robinhood. They have, their IPOs and stuff that you can get in on with them. There's a lot of things that I could probably list off that Robinhood's already developed that Webull, if they are to enter that same space, they already have a huge competitor against them. So this name, I think, if we see a solid report comes back up toward that 750 range, if the report is poor, I've seen some people project it's coming down toward about $4 to $5 or so. But if you're in this name, this is the kind of name where you've got shares and you're looking extremely long term for this, because the company itself needs to continue to develop new services for people to use, new products that that people actually want to be comparative to Robinhood. On the swing plays, what I will say I noticed today is SPY, so SPX, lot of calls sold off. SPX is looking a little bit more bearish. We did actually see quite a bit of puts coming in for SPX, at least for the short term. A lot of big money as well that came in. I just filtered for today. Definitely puts outshine the calls here. All right. Keep in mind, SPX is definitely, it's definitely more pricey at the end of the day. In terms of SPY, it's interesting to see that SPY actually has a little bit of a different narrative here. We definitely saw SPY pop up to the upside. But we are starting to see quite a bit of puts come in. So the theory I would have behind this is that even though we're hearing these rumors about the potentially coming to a resolution to this war, that ultimately that might just be a little bit premature, right? We're still, I saw something about how Pete Hegseth said there's a possibility for up to 8 more weeks of this. What the president tweets always needs to be taken with a grain of salt at this point. He's got a lot of aspirations and they don't always play out the way that he expects. But I do think that there is a possibility that we will come to a resolution. I just don't think we're going to come to that resolution as quickly as he's saying, right? You haven't watched the back test yet, but looking forward to it. Any big takeaways? The big takeaways I would give you for STAX is there's a lot of these that have had some decent moves. For example, it's rare for us to see puts being taken out, but this Western Digital one, these puts have already returned about 30%. I pulled up my charts when they did come up, talked about them last week, and they just look overextended. It's a situation where the stock is trading at near all-time highs. has chopped around for a while, hasn't been able to make a push up higher. PE ratio continues to go up, and even though you can understand the narrative right now is around, storage and uh, memory was something that had its market cycle. When it comes down, it should come down fairly hard. Just like what we saw gold and silver run up super hard, and these were some great plays that we had on Stacks AI. But when they overextend themselves, when they come back down, they come down pretty hard. So Western Digital, I don't know. I don't think it's over yet, but in terms of those moves, Western Digital, I believe here, STAX Tracker can give you a quick peek at it. We've been working on trying to make this pulls data right away, so it takes a little bit, but yeah. STAX Tracker shows that those puts are up about 30%. Right, so those that 1 mil that this person spent is up around 300K. Options price went up to 33.85. It's come back down a little bit, meaning that Western Digital has recovered just a little. Yeah, Stacks AI already has some good prints for March. I like the Microsoft one just because, again, if they're spending 44 mil on it, that's a pretty penny to be spending on it. AMD, this one's already up 22% from where it's at, so keep that in mind. The new one that came in today is CGON. I believe it's a oncology company. $5.9 million spent, $90 strike, which is a 44% move to the upside. June of this year. Fresh position, 0 OI, 7,500 contracts taken. It's actually down so far for today. They got in at 790. It's possible that it's dropped as much to as about $5. They might be able to get a better position, a better entry on this position. IV is at 98% too, by the way. I will say when the CGO one came in, because one of today's biggest winners is Coinbase. Coinbase made a solid recovery off of this potential deal being made where Bitcoin has started to recover. We saw Bitcoin recovered, Coinbase recovered, but MicroStrategy made a very, very small move. So this oncology company, they did just report earnings. Their revenue was a very giant surprise. They are still technically losing money at this point, but there was something about how one of their trials shows high efficacy and durability. So it's been in this channel, finally broke out. These are some decent signs of strength from the lower end. We are breaking above this upper part of this channel, so I do think this very possibly could head up higher from where we're at. Possible it's going to come back and retest. It's kind of retesting 61 or so. But Stacks AI says it's headed higher, so we'll keep an eye on that one. All right, today's big one is just Broadcom. Earnings is in about 10 minutes, so we'll see how that goes. Remember, we said 97% possibility on Polymarket that it's going to beat EPS. It's interesting. Some of these situations, actually, too, there are quite a few Polymarket traders and Kalshi traders that actually take these as like almost free money bets. Like you spend $97 or 97 cents per dollar, you get $1 back once it's done, right? I don't see how Broadcom would miss EPS at this point. But the other question that we do have right now is just that, okay, well, it dropped before this earnings, it recovered. So how much of that's priced in already? We're already pricing in some sort of beat. But it's definitely toward the, if you think of this last earnings, it sold off since then. We're actually lower than that. So definitely a possibility we head up from here. As always, do me a big favor, guys. Hit that like button for me. Always trying to get this algorithm to push us out to more people. So if you could, just the thumbs up helps a lot for us. I see there's 12 of you guys watching right now. And if you do want access to STAX yourself, you do have a code down there in the description box. Iru loves STAX. 20% off your membership. We also did just recently, we acquired the domain staxai.app. So that's just another way that you can get to our website and to everything that we offer. We know investorcentralclub.com just takes a little bit to type in. So staxai.app is the new way for you guys to get to our pages. Also, if you haven't already, hit subscribe. We're getting very close to 5,000 subscribers. I think we're less than 200 away from 1,000 or 5,000 subscribers. So help me out there. That way, also, when I do go live every Wednesday, you'll get a notification, so you won't miss out on any of this stuff. Let me know if there's anything else you want me to look over before we see Broadcom earnings report. Oh, another thing on that Microsoft Stacks AI print. Jim Cramer said he might sell his Microsoft shares. If you want a bullish signal, always do the opposite of what Jim Cramer says. I think you'll usually be just fine. Stacks AI prints Microsoft and Jim Cramer says to sell. That means get in. Oh, always does that. The first BA is part of the dollar index. So, okay, Boeing's just kind of floating through this little wedge that formed. Definitely started to slow down here. We're oversold on the daily. Weekly, not so much. It's interesting because, I mean, it's considered a defense contractor. I would have expected a bigger move to the upside on this. But it looks like it's at a point where it wants to reverse back up. It definitely had a very strong move from here toward the upside. In terms of stacks for Boeing, kind of all over the place, but WaveX definitely has more bullish sentiment, at least for today. Really not that much low. The most recent one is just for this week, saying that it's going to go up toward 235. Yeah, I would have expected with all this, you know, with this war going on, that Boeing would have gotten some more interest than where it's at. I'm surprised that it hasn't moved up, but we saw names like Northrop Grumman, RTX, LMT, Lockheed Martin. We saw Lockheed Martin did really well, especially when we look at STAX Tester. That Lockheed Martin position that came in. Where'd it go? There we go. Down here. This one's like 500%. Yeah. So Lockheed Martin up strong from that. Amazon. I will say Amazon, there was talks about how some of their AWS centers actually got hit with drone strikes. But the name held up pretty strong overall. So we definitely still see quite a bit of buying for Amazon all throughout. Little bits of puts scattered throughout. So it's got these two gaps that, I mean, it was down at this, had a very small inverse head and shoulders that filled a previous gap almost completely. I'd say it's very possible we'll start to see a little bit more of a recovery on Amazon. I wouldn't be surprised to see it go higher. A pretty low volume, strong push up too. So I'd say at least look for it to hit what 220, fill the rest of that gap. If it can come up toward this other gap up here, 227 to about 232. Obviously, remember it's never going to move straight, so probably have moves. I think it's aiming for those upper gaps. All right, let's get back to reports and just reports right now. Direction to go. Ooh, hold on. Not always exactly it. We've seen a lot of these where the first move is not going to be the right. Yeah, there we go. Came right back up. So took a bunch of that liquidity. Does it continue back down or does it head back up? Right. Okay, so revenue was a beat. EPS is a slight beat. $2.05 versus $2.31 or $2.33. Sorry. So beat by 2 cents. Revenue estimate was 19.26 billion and it was 19.31 billion. So I would consider that just to be in line. I mean, it's barely, it's a beat, so your poly market 97% correct, but yeah, market's not loving it because they were expecting a bigger number. Right. Expectations when they are high and when everybody's priced it in, that's you have to think of it as like everybody wants to beat. Price is already a little bit higher because of that. Now if it needs to maintain that or go higher, we gotta, we gotta have numbers bigger than that expectation. But I will say this too, this very possibly could just be an overnight thing and it's gonna come right back up. It's still way too early to tell. And that's been the theme this entire earnings season. Um, the numbers could be great, like we saw, like Nvidia's numbers were great, but everybody expected it. See it chop around throughout the after-hour session and come right back in the morning, and then drop significantly after, right? So, Broadcom dropped here. Now it's back up to flat. Is it gonna go higher? Or is it gonna come right back down? It's hard to say, but at least there's. Now we're in the positive. These earnings are toying with everybody's emotions. Back and forth, back and forth. All right. I wanted to. This is more so for discussion. There's this theory of the market playbook that Trump is going by, right? It's called President Trump's Conflict Playbook, an investor step-by-step guide. This was by the Kobayashi letter that I follow on. Do I see AVGO go to 330 by April? I mean, if this ends up becoming a positive reaction, very possible. There is a gap right there. It's the upper bound of that gap. So if it fills, there's a decent chance we go back up there. Right. Keep an eye on the flow. Keep an eye on what STAX has to say and make your decisions based upon that. I mean, this is starting to look like it wants to curve back up. Didn't retest as low as previously. We'll see how earnings ends up treating this, but earnings looks like it's going to be flat at least for now. Sure. So I wanted to kind of read through this with you guys. If you have any sort of opinions or You guys can go ahead. This is already posted in my yeah, posted. This is posted in my channel. You guys can go and check it out. So basically, I was saying how S&P's up since the war started, but it's pricing out the geopolitical shock and the risk in equities. And he says step 7 of our playbook is near. And so this is, I think this is worth a read. Go ahead and take a look at yourself. But I'm just going to go through it quickly. Give me some conversations in the chat if you see anything that sticks out to you, if you believe in it, or if you notice this as well. But number one, every conflict starts in the same way. So we look at how the war started. It wasn't with the first strike, but it started with it always starts with tweets, right? We start seeing all of our ships and our our planes and everything all headed over there. Okay, so it starts with a tweet with him urging to make a deal, and as a result, the market starts to price in this uncertainty, right? We did it with Venezuela as well, right? There's the conversation about Greenland too. So we're seeing a pattern here. Starts with a tweet about, hey, this is the next strike. This is something that, President Trump wants to go and take over or wants to send our military over. Okay. So step 1, verbal pressure on the target to make a deal. Then strategic posturing, physical positioning. Okay. So Venezuela was with the airspace closures. Okay. You could even say with this happens with our companies as well. Happened with Intel, where he, there was a tweet about how he doesn't like the Intel CEO, and then eventually calls him a success afterwards, right? So there's a risk because there's attention being brought to something. We see the price of that suddenly drop, and then when a resolution starts to be potential, we start to see price recover. All right. So Intel, we saw the company being acquired 10%. We saw price rise extremely. Okay, so that's where he's trying to make a deal. Here's another thing we've also noticed too. A lot of the deals or a lot of the big action happens on a Friday, right? Friday night strike. So if the pressure that he puts on through Twitter and whatever doesn't exactly work, then we end up seeing some sort of move made and usually announced on a Friday. Okay. So these are all Friday nights or Saturday mornings. US Israeli strikes on Iran. US military strikes on Caribbean drug boats. Tariff threat on China. Venezuela airspace closure. Military action Nigeria. And then more strikes on Iran. So he tends not to do it during active market hours because price discovery becomes disorderly. So when it happens on Friday, we're just waiting for markets to open. It affects futures, but realistically, a lot of times what we'll see is on market open, we actually do tend to see some of the price recover a lot as well. Risk premium expansion across asset classes. Okay. Futures market open with a violent move. Markets continue to doubt the longevity of the conflict, right? Because we know he wants to make a deal. Right now, it's especially with crude oil. We did see oil spike a little bit, but it's also recovered and come back down just as well. We'll see what ends up happening, especially with this current conflict. President Trump teases a forever conflict, right? Investors buy the dip in anticipation of the taco trade, right? The market is typically blindsided. Headlines get worse. People expect President Trump will begin removing some of the pressure on the target, but the exact opposite happens. He continues to put more pressure. Keep in mind how the word forever is put in quotation marks, right? Wars can be fought forever. right? The goal, but again, President Trump, you know, he's got his own ego, and he wants to make sure that he's viewed in a positive light. So he wants gas to be low. He wants inflation to be low. Um, you know, he wants it to be a strong economy. And so eventually there will be a situation where a deal is made. The thing is if Iran continues to hold out at this, right? So we're getting close. Step 6, we can begin pricing in a prolonged conflict. I feel that this one with Iran, it's possible we still have this, that we've kind of seen, and here's my argument of this. We might see step 6 below step 7 right now. And because step 6 is that a prolonged conflict, we're kind of in between. Is this going to be a long conflict, or is it going to be short? I don't think any of us can really say so far. He's already teased the fact that, hey, not only could this be long, but we are working on a deal. And that's what we saw today. Markets priced in the deal, right? Conditional de-escalation signals appear, right? The time between steps 6 and 7 is highly variable. So multiple months before leading into the April tariff pause. But in this situation, we see price recover, and that's what we saw today. We saw price go back up toward the top, but it still might take some time for this deal to really, come to fruition. So in the case of the Iran war, either it will be the fall of the Iranian government or something breaking, which is structural in nature for the US and global economies. I believe that something breaking here is going to be related to the price of oil, right? If Iran can somewhat make and control that, that's going to be more and more reason for us to come to a deal faster. Conditional resolution, right? Examples were the tariff deal with China, Greenland deal with the EU, trade deal with India. Okay. And then it leads into our market and political feedback loop. And then the deal and narrative framing at the end. Once that happens, then there's a repricing and political victory lap. This is where we see the pump happen. So I think right now, it is very true. We're somewhere between step 7 and step 6. Are we getting these de-escalation signals? We're starting to see them appear, but I still think that there is a possibility that the markets will continue to price in a prolonged conflict. So we're right in between those two, right? I urge you guys, if you have time, go through, read all of this, have a conversation with me, send me a message, send me a DM. I'm happy to converse about this. But where you think we are? I think right now we are very possibly going to chop around till we see some more tweets from the president talking about what direction we're going with. Because Hegseth has said that this could be up to 8 more weeks of a conflict, which definitely would prolong this. But I think President Trump will continue to say, "Oh, we've got a deal coming. We've got a deal coming," which brings a little bit more certainty to the markets, which could pump it higher. Once it does pump higher, and the deal and the victory lap happens, that's where we're going to see us potentially hit new. All right. That's all that I had for you guys today. Be sure to keep an eye on stuff, especially keep an eye on the VIX. We're definitely seeing a lot of calls being sold off. The VIX has dropped because, again, we're starting to see the de-escalation signals. We will, we'll get an eye on that and see what ends up happening. But again, this market very much is moved significantly due to the president's tweets. That's really where it's at. So keep an eye out for that. I will also say try not to trade on Fridays and hold stuff over the weekend, just because that tends to be when we see these bigger moves happen. If you want to take those risks, that's on you. But that's just my warning, is that we do tend to see a lot of that stuff happen on Fridays. All right. Looks like most of you guys left already. I will see you guys in the next one. I'll be on Discord tomorrow. Otherwise, I'll see you guys on in YouTube tomorrow, or YouTube next week. Have a great rest of your guys' day. I'll chat with you guys later. See ya.